Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, January the 9th, 2021. It is currently 11:06 a.m. Central Time. I'm coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church, located here in Ovalo, Texas, where we are currently under a winter storm watch. Now, supposedly this evening, it's going to turn to rain. It'll start raining. That will start turning, kind of transitioning over to some kind of ice, sleet, and then that will supposedly turn into snow and making travel pretty much impossible for tomorrow. If that occurs, that means I won't be able to drive here to the church to do any live broadcasting or to do any live streaming. So I am here today to try my best to try to get as much content recorded and uploaded so that the members of Victory Baptist Church will have plenty to choose from. So that's what I'm going to do. And I thought I would really kind of kick off this morning with going back to the Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. I still believe this is a very important study. I don't know if we're ever going to finish this, but we're going to keep trying. We're going to keep trying page after page after page. And I know that I have delayed us trying to get close to the end of this book by taking this detour, but I just believe this detour is so important and trying to understand what Thomas à Kempis is saying. Look, the key is to really try to really understand and interpret the book correctly. And sometimes you have to take detours, right? Sometimes you have to take, I know it's a cliche, but sometimes you have to take, 5 steps backwards before you can take a step forward. Before you can truly move forward, you sometimes have to go backwards. And in a sense, we're kind of going backwards in the sense that we're kind of stopped and we're not really moving forward in our study. But I hope it's beneficial. I hope you're benefiting greatly from it. And I'm just going to continue to encourage you, get a copy of The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. You can find a copy if you join the Theology Central Book Club. It's the book that you will see as currently reading, and you can click on it, and then you can download a copy for yourself. There's all kinds of different versions of it, so you can look and see. I've got 2 versions. I've got two translations of the book here in front of me. I continue to go to this old one, this paperback that I've had forever. Literally, it's falling apart. Literally, the top cover is about to just fall off. I've had this for so many years. Early in the 1990s is where I bought this copy at a bookstore in Nebraska while I was on lunch break at the Bible Institute that I was a student at. And I've looked at it and looked at it and looked at it and looked at it, and I don't agree with all the theology in the book. I just still think it's a profound book that really tries to get you to look at life from a spiritual perspective. And man, we so desperately need the spiritual perspective right now. We so desperately need it. I think the church has so lost the spiritual perspective that if the spiritual perspective showed up at the church to visit, people would say, I don't know what you are or who you are or what you think you are, but you need to go because this church doesn't think that way. That is just, your thinking is incompatible with this church. And I know that you think that that's hyperbole, but I truly believe the church has lost all spiritual perspective. We see everything through so fleshly ideological perspectives that it's not even funny. And I'm not going to sit there and start naming all of them again. But yeah, we've talked about that over and over and over. So let's get back to the Imitation of Christ. All right, now we're not going to advance very far today, but I'm so fearful that I didn't do an adequate job in the last episode and our last time together in the book. And I believe if I don't get this point across, you're really going to miss it. So let me build this back up, and I'm going to try to plead with you. I'm going to try to do a lot of begging. It's going to sound like I'm doing a lot of crying and a lot of whining and a lot of pleading and a lot of begging. But I am pleading with you to understand the significance of what I am talking about. All right? Sometimes I hate that I don't feel adequate in trying to get the point across, or maybe I am getting the point across, but nobody thinks the point is important. And that's scary because it isn't. Like I can I can understand you thinking you're not very good in communicating. I can understand that criticism, but I can't understand not seeing the significance of some of the things I've tried to share, not only in this study, but in many other studies. But that's a whole different discussion. Here we go. We are currently in chapter 19 of the Imitation of Christ, which is book 1, chapter 19. And the edition that I have, and the translation I have, they give the title for chapter 19 as Exercises of a Religious Person. Now, class, we all know what he's referring to when he says a religious person. He most likely is referring to someone who's given their life over to a religious order, a nun, a monk, etc., etc. They've joined some religious order, a religious person. Of course, we've taken that to expand it to anyone who calls himself a Christian and try to see what these principles he's given to religious people who are possibly a part of a religious order, how can they translate over to my life and your life? What can we learn from this, all right? So, exercises of a religious person, okay? Now, remember the first sentence. The life of a good religious person ought to be mighty in all virtues. The religious person's life needs to be mighty in all virtues. And I cannot read that. I cannot read that and not think, wait a minute, he's got to have the cardinal virtues in mind. Because that is a classic teaching in Catholicism, that there are 4 cardinal virtues and that everyone needs to be mighty in these virtues. And the reason I think this is so important is because the virtues they outline, I think, are things that many times in the Protestant church we don't emphasize, we don't talk about, we don't preach about, we don't think about. So what we need to do is determine, since we ignore these virtues, we need to look and see, are these virtues indeed biblical virtues? And if they are, then we need to ask ourselves, why have we overlooked them? Why do we ignore them? And what can we do that we can become mighty in these virtues as long as they are biblical virtues? Let me stress that. If they're not biblical virtues, then we're not bound to follow them or put them into place because the Catholic Church says they're important or because Thomas à Kempis says they're important. But so far, I think we've clearly identified that they are biblical virtues. And I was hoping that I was going to get a lot of emails from people going, wow, I've never really thought about those virtues. Now maybe that's the case and people just haven't told me, but I've been really convicted by this because these are virtues that even though I know they exist, I've had to study them when I was working on a degree in Catholic theology from a Catholic university. I've dealt with them when I've studied the Imitation of Christ before. But I always just forget about them and move on and don't think about them, and they don't become a priority in my life because in the Protestant world, I just feel like we don't talk about them. So let's go back. So this is what we did. We read that line, the life of a good religious person ought to be mighty in all virtues, right? Then we set aside the Imitation of Christ and we picked up the Catholic Catechism. We picked up the Catholic Catechism and we went to page 443. And we went to paragraph 1803 is where it starts. But remember, we'll just jump down to paragraph 1805. If you're looking up the Catholic Catechism online, just put in paragraph 1805. That should get you right where we are. The Catechism of the Catholic Church. Here we go. Paragraph 1805. 4 virtues. 4 virtues play a pivotal role and accordingly are called cardinal. All the others are grouped around them. Here are the 4 cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. We studied prudence. Right now on the Bible Memory app, if you'll go to the Bible Memory app, look for VBC, join our group. All of the Bible memory verses that are currently there deal with the virtue of prudence or being a prudent person. I thought I did an adequate job in really getting that one across. The next one was justice. And this is the one I immediately, I felt a burden to really try to get this one across. And because the term justice is so controversial in 2021 and it was in 2020, et cetera, et cetera. And I know I'm repeating a lot of things I said in the last episode, but I'm really trying to get this across, all right? So just bear with the review, okay? And we're not going to spend a lot of time in this episode, so the review will be okay, all right? it's just so, I just hate when the church is yelling like, oh, that church has gone, they start worrying about social justice. And, oh, that Christian singer, all they care about now is social justice. And it's almost like if you care about social justice, somehow that you've deviated from the Bible. You've deviated from Scripture. Like if to turn to social gospel, to turn to social justice now means that you've adopted a social gospel and you no longer care about the Bible and you've become a leftist and you're liberal and a progressive and you hate God. And it's like, wait a minute. I understand that there's the idea of social justice. I understand that there is a social gospel. I understand all of that, and we have to talk about those things and talk about those things when they do deviate from the truth of Scripture. But while we're condemning that, we need, well, you know what? Before we condemn that, let me state it this way. Before you go condemn the leftist, the liberal, the progressive for all of their social justice and their wokeness and their social gospel, how about you stop before you go outside to start condemning everyone or before you hop on social media to condemn everyone? How about you go look in the mirror and ask yourself, is justice a biblical virtue? And if it is, how are you demonstrating justice? Are you ready for this? In society. Social justice? Or how are you demonstrating as a Christian justice in society? Are you even told to do that? Should we even care about quote unquote social justice? It seems that within much of the conservative evangelical world, social justice is a liberal thing, leftist thing, communist, Marxist, crazy thing. And it's like, well, slow down here. Is it biblical? Is this idea of justice biblical? That's all I want you to see. And I gave you some assignments. I don't know if you did the assignments. No one sent me their assignment. They were supposed to give me 5 verses from the Bible that they think are the best ones that articulate justice. I didn't receive any replies from anyone, so I never know how to interpret silence. But I'm hoping that here's what I'm hoping, okay? And I know I'm an idiot, but here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping people started looking up all the verses on justice, and they were so overwhelmed with conviction that they found themselves laying on the floor in a pool of tears, crying out to God, and so they haven't had the ability to email me any comments or feedback on the subject. That's what I'm going to hope. That's what I'm going to believe. People are so overwhelmed with conviction, and I can just sell it that way. No, that's probably foolish. But I'm hoping that there was some conviction there, because I think this is a virtue that we've got to figure out. What is the biblical understanding of this? What is the biblical understanding of the idea of justice? All right, now, let's read what the Catechism had to say about justice, all right? Here we go. Justice is the moral virtue that consists in the constant and firm will to give their due to God and neighbor. Let me read that again. Justice is a moral virtue that consists in the constant and firm will to give their due to God and neighbor. Obviously, God would be, a virtue of religion. That's what the Catholic Church calls it, all right? In fact, justice towards God is called the virtue of religion, all right? We're not talking about that right now. We're talking about justice towards your neighbor. Now, there's social justice. I don't know how else you can not see how it has a societal impact. Justice towards men disposes one to respect the rights of each and to establish in human relationships the harmony that promotes equity with regards to persons and to the common good. The just man, often mentioned in the sacred scripture, is distinguished by habitual right thinking and the uprightness of his conduct towards his neighbor. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great, but in righteousness shall you judge your neighbor. Masters, treat your slaves justly and fairly, knowing that you also have a master in heaven. And they quote there, those are from Leviticus 19:15 and Colossians 4:1. All right, there we have it. Very simple outline of justice. So if you look up justice in the Bible, you can get close the King James sometimes I think uses different words like judgment. The word judgment is used at times. So you have to kind of really dig in and try to get all of what the Bible is saying about it. So I just did a little bit of research and a little bit of study, and I grabbed a notebook and I wrote down, these are the following verses that I wrote down that I just think really just jumped out at me off the page about justice, right? I'm not saying these are the best. These are just some that jumped out at me. I'm going to give you the references. We'll look at them. Isaiah 1:17, Psalm 106:3, Zechariah 7:9, Deuteronomy 16:20, and Leviticus 19:15, which is quoted there in the Catechism. Isaiah 1:17, Psalm 106:3, Zechariah 7:9, Deuteronomy 16:20, Leviticus 19:15. Oh, and there was another one that I had. Is it in? Let me see here. I think it's in. Let me look here. And I'm sorry, I'm dropping things. It's in the book of Micah. Yeah, it's in the book of Micah. And we'll look at that one as well. I forgot to write that one down. That was I think that was the main one I wanted. All right. Now, I apologize, I keep hitting the microphone. All right. So Isaiah 1:17, Psalm 106:3, Zechariah 7:9, Deuteronomy 16:20, and Leviticus 19:15. And just note that in some of these verses, they don't necessarily use the word justice. They use judgment in the King James. But we're going to look it up and we're going to consider some of these. All right. So let's go through these. I have multiple Bibles here, and I have them also here in electronic form. So let's look at this. Now let's look at some of these verses, okay? Where do we want to go here? Let's look at, the first one we'll go to is the Isaiah one. We'll go to the Isaiah one first, right? Because I think it's important, all right? Let's go to... let me find it. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 17. All right, I'm going to read this in a different translation first. Isaiah 1:17. Learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. Learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. Now, why did I choose Isaiah 1 right there? Well, let me grab my Bible here. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 1. I think there's a method here to what I was thinking. See if you agree with me. All right, Isaiah chapter 1. Isaiah chapter 1. Got a new Bible here. Give me a second. All right, or newer, I should say. It's not completely new now. Isaiah chapter 1. All right. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 1, we are told, we learn that this is the vision of Isaiah, the son of Amoz, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, kings of Judah. So here is a vision he receives concerning Judah and Jerusalem. All right? And in verse 2, he says, Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord hath spoken. I have nourished and brought up children, and they have rebelled against me. So God has some very strong words against Israel. Hey, I brought them up as children. I nourished them. I brought them up. I took care of them. I fed them. And guess what? They've rebelled against me. Verse 3, the ox knoweth his owner, and the ass his master's crib, but Israel doth not know, my people doth not consider. The people of Israel, they no longer care about God. They ignore God. They don't consider God. They've turned away from God. Verse 4, a sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are corrupters. They have forsaken the Lord. They have provoked the Holy One of Israel unto anger. They are gone away backward. Why should you be stricken anymore? You will revolt more and more. The whole head is sick, the whole heart faint. From the sole of the foot even unto the head there is no soundness in it, but wounds and bruises and putrefying sores. They have not been closed, neither bound up, neither mollified with ointment. I mean, it's a very descriptive Very descriptive words are being used to show how sinful and rebellious and ungodly Israel had become. Here's God's chosen people, God's covenant people, who are in a horrific spiritual condition, right? Continue. Verse 7, your country is desolate. Your cities are burned with fire. Your land, strangers devour it in your presence, and it is desolate as overthrown by strangers. Look around you. Look at your condition. Look at how bad things have gotten. Verse 8, and the daughter of Zion is left as a cottage and a vineyard, as a lodge and a garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city. Except the Lord of hosts had left unto us a very small remnant, we should have been as Sodom and we should have been like unto Gomorrah. Unless God spared a remnant, they would be like Sodom and Gomorrah. They'd be gone. They'd be destroyed. They'd be wiped off the face of the earth in a figurative way. They'd be no more. Now look at verse 10. Hear the word of the Lord, ye rulers of Sodom. Now he's calling the rulers of Israel the rulers of Sodom. Give ear unto the law of our God, you people of Gomorrah. Hey, rulers of Sodom, basically the rulers are like the rulers of Sodom, and the people are like the people of Gomorrah. Ungodly people. He wants them to listen to the law of the Lord. Verse 11, to what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices unto me, saith the Lord? I am full of the burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fed beast, and I delight not in the blood of bullocks or of lambs or of he-goats. Hey, they continue all their spiritual worship and their sacrifice. They continue the pretense of being godly and following God, but something is obviously horribly wrong. Verse 12, and God is not pleased. He's tired of their sacrifices. He's tired of their religious worship. Look at verse 12. When you come to appear before me, who hath required this at your hand to tread my courts? Bring no more vain oblations. Incense is an abomination unto me. The new moons and Sabbaths, the calling of assemblies, I cannot away with. It is iniquity, even the solemn meeting. Hey, your church meeting, and not obviously their worship meeting, to say it correctly, but to use it in language we can relate to. Hey, your church meeting, you're making me sick. Get it out of here. Get away from me. I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. God is upset with their meeting. So what is wrong? They're sinful, they're rebellious, but they still want to maintain some external form of religious behavior. Right, let's continue. I know you're saying, what does this have to do with justice? Just continue. Verse 14, your new moons and your appointed feasts, my soul hateth. They are a trouble unto me. I am weary to hear them. He now hates their worship. He hates their celebrations. He hates their feast days. He hates everything they're doing. He's tired of them. He's weary of them. Verse 15, and when you spread forth your hands, I will hide mine eyes from you. Yea, when you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. God's not going to listen to their prayers anymore. He's tired of hearing their prayers. They pray. They lift up their hands to God, but their hands are full of blood. What have they been doing? Verse 16, wash you, make you clean, put away the evil of your doings from before mine eyes, cease to do evil. And so stop doing evil, and look what he wants them to do. Learn to do well, seek judgment, relieve the oppressed, judge the fatherless, and plead for the widow. Wow. That sounds a little bit like social justice. In fact, if you read that verse in some translations, it will read like this. Learn to do right, seek justice. Learn to do right, seek justice, or seek judgment. The virtue of justice. And remember, the virtue of justice has to do with how we treat God, right? The virtue of religion, but it mainly focuses on how we treat other people. And look and so it's just interesting. Do what's right. Hey, stop doing evil. Do what's right. And here's what you need to do. Seek justice. And it's almost as if he goes on to explain what that justice looks like. Defend the oppressed. Defend those who are oppressed. We need to defend them. Take up the cause of the fatherless and plead the case of the widow. In other words, those people who are in difficult situations, we should care about and do what we can for justice, which sounds a little bit like, I don't know, social justice. But this is a virtue that if you think this way, look at them, they've gone to a social gospel. Look at them, they've been woke. Look, and it's like, why is that our response? Our response should be, well, the Bible does say a lot about justice. Israel was a mess, and it's just interesting that when he starts saying what they have done wrong, he tells them to do evil. Immediately when he tries to correct their wrong, that's where he starts. To me, I just think that's fascinating where he starts. He goes on to say, immediately, so to do right, this is what he wants them to do: to seek judgment or justice, relieve the oppressed, judge the fatherless, plead for the widow. And then immediately he says, come now, let us reason together. So though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be white as snow. They shall be red like crimson. They shall be as wool. So the main thing he corrects them in doing is doing justice. Is the church a source of calling for justice? Now, again, the one thing I will stress is that when the world says, what do we want? Justice. When do we want it now? They don't really have a basis for justice. They have no moral basis. Why should anyone act just? Why should there be justice? They can't explain that. But the Christians, we can, and we should strive for justice. And we, most importantly, before we start trying to impose justice on the world, we have to make sure that the church acts in a just manner. That the way we act, that we are carrying out justice in the way we treat people. That's the emphasis that we should have. All right. Now, there's Isaiah 1:17. I'm going to go ahead and throw in the one I did not have written down here. Okay. Because I had written down Isaiah 1:17, Psalm 106:3, Zechariah 7:9, Deuteronomy 16:20, and Leviticus 19:15. One I forgot to write down was Micah 6:8. Micah 6:8, and I believe I have it right here marked in my Bible. Micah 6:8, and this is a famous one here. Micah 6:8. All right? Micah 6:8. He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee? So he has shown us what is good and what God requires: to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. We need to memorize Micah 6:8. I'm going to put this in the Bible memory app. We need to memorize this verse, and it needs to be a verse that we care and seek to try to live out. Now, we're never going to live these out perfectly. Please understand, these are law-based ideas. We're going to always fall short. That's why we got to rely on Christ, who did all of these things perfectly. But we still have to try to live and seek to do these things. So I want to give them again. God, what? See, here he goes. Micah 6:8. He has showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee. Here's the things. Number one, to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. Does that reflect your life? That you're a person who tries to do justly, you love mercy, and you walk humbly with your God? I think that's missing so much. In fact, I hate the fact that that's almost like, well, that sounds like that liberal stuff. And you know why we've started thinking some of these ways? Because we've been infected with a political ideology that now has corrupted our understanding of even justice. Like if you care about justice and you care about mercy, you care about some of these things, it's like, oh, you liberal, what's wrong with you? You need to take a stand and fight. And it's like, no, I'm sorry. I don't get my marching orders from the Trump Twitter account that used to exist, that no longer exists. I don't get it from that. I get it from God. And I know when I say that, Christians get mad at me, but I'm sorry. So much of the dialogue and speech that's come from the Christian world, just listen to Christian radio. It doesn't sound like people who are trying to do justly, who's trying to show mercy, and is trying to walk humbly with their God. Sounds like people want to start a fight with a liberal. Sounds like a person who wants to destroy liberals. It's like, where's godliness here? Where's justice here? All right. So there's Micah 6:8. I had not written that one down. So we'll go Isaiah 1:17, Micah 6:8, and now we'll go to Psalm 106:3. Psalm 106:3. Psalm 106:3. And I apologize that I keep going back from the iPad where I have it in other translations in my physical Bible, but I prefer the physical Bible. So even though it causes a little delay in me picking it up, I think it's okay. All right, here we go. Psalm 106:3. Blessed are they that keep judgment, and he that doeth righteousness at all times. He that keepeth judgment. Now, the other translation, I got to find it here, reads this way. Hang on, let me find it. I've got like 100 verses, and I'm not lying here, that deal with justice, because I've just been working my way through them, trying to go which ones I think really speak to me. Psalm 106:3 is, blessed are those who act justly, who always do what is right. We are blessed when we do justly. There's a blessing there. We should seek to be blessed by doing justly, doing judgment, seeking judgment, doing the right thing. And again, that typically refers to how we relate to other people, all right? So there's Psalm 106:3. So we've looked at Isaiah 1:17, Micah 6:8, Psalm 106:3. Let's look at Zechariah chapter 7, verse 9. Let's look at Zechariah chapter 7, verse 9. And I'm going to look at Zechariah 7:9. I'm going to look at it. Hang on, give me one second. Zechariah. I've got all these verses here. Zechariah 7:9. Zechariah 7:9. This is what the Lord Almighty said. This is what God said. Administer true justice and show mercy and compassion to one another. Please note that justice is again connected to how we treat other people. And guess what's connected with it? Mercy and compassion. Mercy and compassion. Mercy and compassion. Mercy and compassion. How many people were killed as a result of everything that happened in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. when the rioters broke in? And guess what I hear from Christians? Well, what about these protests? And what about this protest? And what about this? And I think it was a conspiracy. And like, excuse, just stop. People died. Where's your mercy? Where's your compassion? Where's your understanding for wanting justice? When George Floyd was murdered, then from much of the Christian conservative media was like, almost like make excuses about it. And when I say make excuses about it, it's almost like they wanted to ignore the fact that he was murdered and then start complaining about the way people were protesting. Now, yes, some of the protests turned to riots and buildings were destroyed, and that is wrong. But you can't then focus on that wrong and overlook the fact that a human being was murdered by a police officer. And any other cases where the shootings definitely were not right or just. You should care about justice. Justice. Not your political affiliate. Well, this makes my political affiliation looks bad. This makes conservatives look bad. Oh, this can make white people look bad. I'm worried about how Stop worrying about how it makes you look and worry about justice. Mercy, compassion. This virtue is so important, right? And I am stressing my words in a ridiculous way, but I'm doing so because I'm trying to get the point across. All right? How about Deuteronomy 16:20? Deuteronomy 16:20, which reads, follow justice and justice alone, so that you may live and possess the land the Lord your God is giving you. This is God giving directions to Israel when they go into the land. What are they to do? To follow justice and justice alone. That was what God called them to do. Now, you could argue that some of the things they did didn't appear to be just, but they were following God's rules and what they were to do. But once they were established there, justice was to become something that they did. In other words, God has called for his people to act in a just manner time and time and time again. It is a virtue that we need to be seeking to live accordingly. And then Leviticus 19:15. Leviticus 19:15 is the last one I have here. Leviticus 19:15. And I know some of these we read last time, but I gave you the chance to do the work, and then I just wanted to show you that, hey, I'm doing the work with you. I'm not just asking you to do something I'm not doing. Leviticus 19:15 says, do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. Now, a lot of that had to do with the civil law for Israel, but it's true in how we deal with people. We do not want to pervert justice. We don't want to support the perversion of justice. We don't want that. We want people to be treated fairly in an equitable way. Those are the verses that jumped out at me. So let me ask you again. The virtue of justice, how much have you given it thought in your own thinking? How much of your Christian worldview has been devoid of the virtue of justice? When you look at the world, what do I hear? And I'll hear Christians talk, and I'm just like, where are they getting this speech and this idea and their attitude? It's so far removed from Christianity, and I can't stand it. When you hear it, and it's like, no, that sounds like Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Fox News. That's not where we get our marching orders. That's not where we get our worldview. If it doesn't sound like Christ in Scripture, it's not Christian. See, we somehow got this idea conservative means Christian, and it doesn't. Christian means Christian. All right? Now, Christianity may sometimes reflect a conservative worldview, but it's a Christian worldview. It's not a conservative worldview. I hate when people say, I'm a conservative Christian. No, I am a Christian, not liberal, not conservative, Christian. There's no qualifier. Christian worldview, not a Christian conservative worldview. It's a Christian worldview. No qualifier. And the Christian worldview must flow from these virtues. And the virtues we've looked at so far is being prudence, the virtue of prudence, being prudent. And you need to know what that is. And it has to also flow from a virtue of justice. Justice. Is your life devoid of those virtues? Thomas à Kempis in The Imitation of Christ wants religious people that he says religious people, in fact, let me read it, the sentence again. We're going to paraphrase the sentence now. The life of a good religious person ought to be mighty in prudence and justice. Now I'm going to continue. I'm going to put the whole sentence together. The life of a good religious person ought to be mighty in prudence and justice, that he may inwardly be such as outwardly he seems to men. And with reason there ought to be much more within that is perceived without. For God beholds us, whom we are bound most highly to reverence wherever we are, and to walk in purity like angels in his sight. What he wants is that these virtues flow from the inside of us. Inside of us, there's the prudence. Inside of us, this idea of justice. It's a part of who we are, and then it shows up outwardly, that the outward and the inward match. Do you have an attitude of justice and an attitude of virtue inside of you? I'll stop right there. There is our study today of The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. Next, in our next study, we will move on to the next virtue. There you have it. We'll move on to the next virtue, and hopefully you find it to be as beneficial and helpful as I am. I love to get your feedback, love to get your comment. Email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. I love getting the feedback, love hearing from you. All right, everyone have a great day. God bless.